Hello once again, and welcome back to another Haphazard Universe production. This is my new Facebook page, gang. I just opened it up, as I mentioned in the beginning of my productions, that if I got the response, I would continue to carry forth and do all of the little details, like put in a link so that any payments that I get will go towards equipment for video production, and or outfits, costumes, backgrounds, and etc. In today's production, we are going to be covering a lot of information dealing with energy, words, happiness, and the conveyance of energy through words and details of words, and what is called gematria. Now, I had put out a massive, elaborate production, including the Pope once again admonishing my channel. However, that took me 2 days to create that video, and I accidentally deleted it out of my own error and ignorance and inexperience. And so that's why this one's taken a while to put together. We're also going to be talking about, in this particular one, we're talking about filters and how a filter can really clear things up. And so maybe I should call this the Haphazard Universe Filter channel. At any rate, I hope you enjoy today's production, and thank you for watching. Please comment, subscribe, and share if you found anything fascinating or curious or uplifting. Okay, with that out of the way, this first video I'm going to show you is going to proceed a little bit on numerology and gematria and how things add up. And not basically, these are from links. Now, this particular video, this man is showing an infrared filter on his camera, and he shows before and after images, like right here, for instance. You see where obvious grain on the left and then clarity on the right using this filter. And he goes through some great shots flying over. Okay, here he is flying over and looking at the smoke as he's flying over in an airplane. Smoke, you notice all the haze. Now he puts the filter on the camera and turns the camera back out the window, and this is quite amazing. Now he zooms in, and you can see every detail of the contours of the landscapes, and he actually has to zoom in to find that smoke that was overtaking so much of the frame a minute ago. And this video is called Denoising the World, and it is pretty amazing. He just shows this infrared filter in a variety of different, and the clarity is just astonishing, in my humble opinion. And then he shows other evidentiary details of how far and the distances that you can see without any, obfuscation because of curvature, you might. And you may think that this part of the video with the filter being shown is non sequitur to these cards, but no, we filter everything that we see, and it is by our filter that we can clarify details, and thus the sublimated. And it is by the filters through which we see that we determine our own specific reality. And right, and so in this part of the video, I just wanted to mention the filter is what we see through, and having a filter or someone to convey things through can occasionally clear things up. So anyway, It's a good video preceding my numerology gematria video. I would suggest going to the link that I will share in my description. I thought it was a great video. Whoop, might want to subscribe, and you could subscribe too. And if you like this video, please share. I could use, as usual, trying to beef up the channel. Now let's get to gematria. The cards I created some 30 years ago to study the different relationships and correspondences and energies in dealing with each letter of the alphabet and the similarly relating numbers and colors and vibrations, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Nordic runes, and of course then we have the gods up top. We've got the Roman and Greek and Egyptian and Norse gods. And the different powers are the relationships that are related through several different chronicles throughout history. And I have made a compilation and a deck of cards so that I could and can relate and study the vibrations. Also study the concepts. If you look at the intelligence up top, imaginative intelligence. And very many of these cards are misunderstood because of our training and education, like this one, for instance, in the word that's up above. It has direction, meaning, and content, and that is through the training that we have been given throughout our lives. And so I wanted to run through some of these, give you a view of each and every one and each and every one of the symbols to allow everyone who watches my channel to have a better idea of the symbols that are used in our society. And I will go back through this one more time just to keep it fairly simple. And the mundane details in each of these are basically the descriptions, the tarot descriptions in learning, knowledge, educating self and others, nurturing, caring, creativity, giving. These are what we can apply in our lives. So this isn't telling anyone what to do. It is giving an idea, advice, you might say. A lot of people who have purchased these have told me, well, several anyway, that when they get up in the morning they draw one and look at it and give it a meditation on today's activities, the forthcoming day's activities. And so the vibrations, the colors, the meaning, the intent, the content in these cards and the creation of these cards was to communicate more thoroughly with my own reflections. And as I have mentioned, I consider that we are in a planetarium reflecting off of our knowledge, whatever you have decided is important enough to memorize and to get the angles, say the angles of Mars or the angles of Perth, the different intentions and directions of energy, and how you are able to communicate with that personally. It doesn't have that much, if anything, to do with someone else's description. Someone else's description is only for your personal comparison, but it takes your own drive, your own interest, and your own concern for the knowledge to actually get anything, from them that is, tangible, usable details. And if you've ever seen a Haphazard production, you will know that I have some curious questions, and just looking at one of these cards, I'm sure that you can see a variety of curiosities. And what I wanted to bring up in this particular one is two things, actually. One is, you notice it says fire here, and that is an element. And in other ones, you have seen astrological symbols, such as Pisces or Aquarius, and in other cards you have seen astronomical, such as Mars or Venus. And I wanted to mention that 3 of the 4 elements are on these cards: air, fire, and water. And the final conclusion, I'll give you one of the secrets, is that there is no Earth, because that's what the cards are. Now, I wanted to mention as well that if you notice this line going down here on the right side, the body figure. And so the question or curiosity from me, or from me to you, is that whether or not you see this body facing you, or you see it turned the other way. Kind of like the spinning lady I did in just a couple of videos ago. And the answer to the quiz is that this body is facing you. And that's just a little point I wanted to bring up, because as you face it, as you look at it, it's on the left side, but it is actually on the right hip to the earth. So, Hod to Malkut. So I wanted to mention that briefly, and of course the spectral size, as I've mentioned in a past video. If you could imagine yourself, that was you standing there, and the entire universe as you know it was that little star. That is the perspective in communicating on a higher spiritual nature, is to be a greater spiritual essence. And so that's what I wanted to mention in this particular moment. Now we're going to get into the next part of this issue. And now the variety of viewpoints that I could be taking this from could be, they are vast and varied. As a matter of fact, I could be extremely analytical about my viewpoint on this and get down into the breakdown of the details. Or I could be sarcastic about the details about this. And you don't let people run your life. I mean, you don't let cards run your life. You don't let people run your life either. Fossil? Why is a fossil the stone of judgment? That is a curious situation indeed. When you consider the fossilization, petrification, and the sudden flooding in relation to fossilization. And there are a lot of interrelated curiosities in dealing with the spirit of primal fire and Apollo, or Vulcan. Live long and prosper. Fascinating, Captain. And so the comedic viewpoint I would prefer, because that is the haphazard way to be a little comedic and then get really serious. All of a sudden, we're going to have a happy time talking about death and gloom. And that's not exactly the way. But just looking at this, and the red poppy, for instance, or hibiscus. I mean, one could do a 1-hour essay on this interrelated detail, along with the color red and the takeover of the New World Order. And as I'm not sure what channel I saw yesterday, one of the greats, Colorado being the central setup area, because Colorado means color red, and how that interrelates to this particular card, and the details in concerning the relationships. Let me back off so you can get more of an overall view. And Hebrew meaning tooth. And the sigil is sigil, sigil, or Norse rune. So there are variances you will find in several interrelated, like the value, for instance, or how the numerology and gematria are done, as mentioned in the video that we are about to see right now. I'm not Jewish, I'm a recovering Catholic, but I did make these 30 years ago. If you've seen my past videos, you know I've had some training in the priesthood and some, but got out of it. I'm a recovering Catholic. No, this next gentleman is a Jewish rabbi, and I thought he did a fascinating essay on gematria. So let's get to it. Thank you for joining this haphazard essay. And as usual, it was going through links. This is Allison Marie's link here. And I noticed the word gematria for beginners. I have never seen this gentleman prior to this. It's probably got his name in here somewhere. Yeah, it just said right there, Rabbi Jacobson, for a journey down the rabbit hole and discover the elegant art and science of gematria. And as just a quick prelude here, there are many, many ways to do gematria, and he actually says that in his essay here. But he really puts things well. I give this guy, he's one excellent scholar, in my opinion.
But then it's harnessed and channeled in expression.
Now he's talking about
Sometimes
names
an expression that,
and gematria.
I like to believe that when I try to write and communicate, you're really trying to express the inexpressible. That's really what it comes down to.
When you're
trying
writing.
to express feelings and sentiments and experiences that are not always easy to quantify in words. And so therefore you have to use the right metaphors and the right analogies, and most importantly, you need to find those words that resonate with you and with another. And that resonance is really where you create the connection. But you can only do it through words, because if you don't have the words, you don't have the channel, you don't have the bridge. The bridge is a good word here. The bridge to bridge two people. But what are you using on this? What are you conveying on this bridge? What's traveling across this bridge, however, are feelings and sentiments that are sometimes not exactly described and can fit into the regular parameters of words. Which is why often one of the ways we communicate is through song. You sometimes can't communicate it through exact prose or particular rational words or language. So we use a song, or we use a feeling, or we use an expression. People relate to the word oy vey. I think everybody understands what that means, even though it doesn't have any particular meaning in the dictionary. Or a cry, or a laugh. So the point I'm making here is I'm trying to explain the so-called the science behind language, behind linguistics. And the science really is that there's an energy and there are containers. So this introduction is critical to really understand the mystery of the gematria. So let's go over to the gematria now. So if words are energy, if letters are energy, and words are the synergy of several letters coming together, and I'll use the classic, as I said, the Hebrew word baruch is the best example, because baruch means blessing. Baruch atah, you are blessed, you shall be blessed. So the word baruch is made up of 4 Hebrew letters, beis, resh, vav, and chav. If you want to use the word in English, bless, let's say bless or blessing, B-L-E-S-S. But as I said, I'm focusing on the Hebrew, but I'll explain it all obviously in English. So this is an example of using language to explain something that may be beyond some people's language, because not everybody knows Hebrew. So the word baruch or bless is made up of letters, and the letters themselves, the B, for example, of bless could be a B in other words. It could be the B of building, it could be the B of bricks, it could be the B of a bumblebee, if you wish. So that B can be used in many different ways. It's just a brick. Think of a brick in a building. But then when that brick, that one letter combines with another letter, an L, which again is a letter that can be used in many words, and an E, and an S, and an S, or beis, resh, vav, chav, which can be used in many different combinations. Now that you combine them in this particular order, you have suddenly a new energy enters, what we call synergy. It's more than the sum of the parts. It's not just a B, and an L, and an E, and an SS. It's not just a beis, a resh, a vav, and a chav. It is now the meaning blessing. Blessing, we all know, is much more than just 4 letters, random letters. Now the letters, the bricks have come together and have shaped a message, have shaped a feeling. Someone says, I want to bless you. It's a lot more than just a bunch of letters. They're giving you a blessing. They're giving you a bracha, a blessing. And the same thing with says, I love you, L-O-V-E. The love word in Hebrew, love, is ahava. Also 4 letters, aleph, hey, vav, hey. So this again conveys much more than just single bricks. These bricks have now turned into a structure, and that structure is the word that conveys a message that's more than the sum of the parts. But it's made up of those parts. So you have to say those parts all have their energy. Then there's a synergy that enters what is often called the eir in Hebrew, in the Kabbalistic language, eir ha'ela al kulana, a type of synergy that hovers and is more than the sum of the letters, which is the word. Now, of course, that's one word. When you combine several words, you create a sentence. And sentences create paragraphs, and paragraphs create chapters, and chapters create books, and books create volumes, and there you have the whole story of the rest is history. The point is that it all begins with these letters, and whether it's letters of speech or the written word, it's the same idea. It's just two different forms of letters. One is coming out of your mouth, and one is being engraved or written on paper or on parchment or engraved in a tablet. And what I mean by tablet, I don't mean the modern tablet. I mean the tablets as they were given at Sinai, such tablets. So once you understand language and letters in that fashion, now the interesting thing is, if a letter is indeed a channeler of energy, then this letter has to be analyzed and dissected. So here we have several ways we look at letters. Besides the fact that the letters add up to a word, the letters also have a shape. Every letter has a shape. An aleph, for example, is a diagonal line with a dot on the right side and on top right and a dot on the bottom left. A beis is three lines with an open left side, like a square without the left side of the square. A gimel is harder to describe. It's a line with it, but each Hebrew letter has its shape, and that shape indeed also, as I said before, with the film and the projector. The shape of letters is what shapes the energy. Follow that shape. So the shape itself carries and describes that kind of energy it is. So let's take the word beis as a matter of fact. The word beis has another meaning. Beis also is a bayit. If you know a little Hebrew, you know that bayit is a house. And a beis actually looks like a house. What does a house usually look like? You make three lines, and that's a house, right? A wall, and a roof. That's a beis, an inverted beis. And the same thing with aleph, and the same thing with gimel. So besides the fact that the letter itself makes up the word bayit, the shape of the letter contains the energy of that letter. So now we have the shapes. Then we have the meanings of each letter. Like I just said, beis is also a house. Aleph can mean master. Aleph can mean teacher. So Aleph has many of its own meanings, and the same thing, each of the letters has its meaning. What we're going to focus on here is a third element in each letter, is its numerical equivalent, which we'll be calling numerology. That's the gematria. So what's a gematria? A gematria literally means the number that corresponds to the letters of the alphabet, of the Hebrew alphabet. So we have a system for this. It's actually quite complex. I'm going to focus on the basics, even though we call this gematria for beginners. I was wondering whether to use that word. I'll tell you why, just as an aside. I remember I was once giving a series of classes at the Open Center here in the city. It was on Spring Street when I was teaching then they moved somewhere in the town. And I gave a number of classes there. And one of the classes, the program director called me. She was really good with the titles and so on. She said, let's do a class called Kabbalah for Beginners. So I told her, I don't know if that's a great title. Who wants to be called? No one likes to be called a beginner. So she said to me, they said the same thing about those books, like, Accounting for Dummies, Computers for Dummies, this for dummies, that for dummies. And first people thought maybe it won't work. No one wants to be called a dummy. But the tongue-in-cheek element, actually saying it in their people's face, actually did resonate. They said, no problem. Once you're telling me I'm a dummy, at least you're not hiding the fact. So it worked. It was a good marketing tool. Then became a series for idiots, right? Something like that, Cooking for Idiots and Accounting for Idiots. Not sure what the difference between an idiot and a dummy is, but two brands. So we have an idiot and dummy brand. Okay, now, this was all, so I said to her, I don't know if it's a great idea to call Kabbalah for beginners. She said, let's try. And we did it. Around, I recall, 35 people attended. Then the series was very nice, successful. It was recorded. I think we even have it on, we'll make it available on our site. Then a few months later, she said, let's do another one. So I said, let's try advanced Kabbalah. We did the beginners, let's do advanced Kabbalah. She says, what are you going to say? I said, I'm going to say the same thing, but let's call it advanced Kabbalah. We had over 100 people showed up. So I said, you see, I think maybe when it comes to cooking for dummies, they don't have a problem. But for Kabbalah, everyone wants the advanced version. They don't want the beginner's version. So I was thinking about the gematria for beginners. So I said, let's test it as well. We'll do gematria for beginners this week, and some other point we'll do advanced gematria. The truth is, it's all advanced, to be very honest. And even for advanced people, you also have to begin with the beginning and begin with the basics.
Another brief interjection just to mention that this is about synergy and energy and the combinations of words and letters, the values and numbers that are associated with letters, and the energies that are related and associated to the numbers, the combinations of numbers, and the associations between things in life and their accumulative number. As a curiosity, this is the essay's issue. Not about religion, it's not about demonic symbology, it's about a more calculated and scientific view of vibrations and energies and in names and what's in a name. Just wanted to mention that briefly, and back to the essay.
So don't be deceived by the name. And we didn't call Gematria for dummies. We didn't call Gematria for idiots. That's not Meaningful Life Center style. But Gematria for beginners, the art and science of Jewish numerology. So the truth is, it is.
I'd like to interject here, as usual in my productions, to mention that it is the combination of letters added up to a final denominator to give an indication, vibration, or intent or meaning to, for whatever reason you are working the numbers, whatever reason, whatever knowledge. So the variety of ways and avenues in using numerology in Gematria are vast and varied. I wanted to mention that before you hear this next part, and then I'll leave it for a bit, but not play the entire hour, but a good 20 minutes of it.
It is a very complex study, to be honest, because in Gematria itself, and I'll point it out in this discussion, there's probably, I would say, 30 different ways of doing a Gematria. How do you like that? So I'm going to begin with the most basic way, and that is that in the Hebrew alphabet there are 22 letters. 22 letters and 5 what we'll call, what are they called? Vowels, not vowels. No. 5 letters that have a double letter that you use at the end of a word, which is Mem, Nun, Tzadik, Pei, Chof. So it's really 22 letters, but I'm not going to discuss the other 5 because they'll just complicate matters. Let's stick to the 22. So based on what I've said, Ois and Os is Eis Asa Boiker. Asa Boiker. So Os comes from the word transmission, channeling, directing, guiding, light. Right? So based on that, it's like 22, think of it, 22 of transmissions. Each one with its own particular personality, its own shape, its own meaning, and of course its own number, which is what we're focusing on. And the general way it's structured goes like this. The first 10 letters are 1 to 10. So you have Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Ches, Tes, Yud is 1 to 10, with Aleph being number 1. Beis is 2, Gimel is 3, Daled is 4, and Yud is 10. Then it jumps by tens. So you have the next is 10, 20, 30. You don't go by units any longer, we go by tens. So Yud till Kuf would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. I'll be specific, I'll spell it out in case somebody wants to. I'll start again. Aleph is 1, Beis is 2, Gimel is 3, Daled is 4, Hey is 5, Vav is 6, Zayin is 7, Ches is 8, Tes is 9, and Yud is 10. So we got the first 10 letters. We have another 12 to go. And here's how it works. The next is Chaf. So Yud is 10, Chaf is 20, Lamed is 30, Mem is 40, Nun is 50, Samach is 60, Ayin is 70, Pei is 80, Tzadik is 90, and Kuf is 100. So now we have 20 letters. Well, 19 I should say. And then we have Reish, Shin, Tov, the last 3. And now it jumps to hundreds. So now we went 10 units, then we went 10 tens, and now we go from Kuf is 100, Reish is 200, Shin is 300, and Tov, the final of the 22 letters, is 400. So let's take any word let's take the word Baruch as I mentioned. So what would be the Gematria of Baruch? The Beis is 2, the Reish is 200, the Vav is 6, so we have 208, and the Chaf is 20. So we have 228. Take any name. Let's take a name. Give me, anyone has a Hebrew name here? Tell me your Hebrew name. Adina? Yeah. Okay. You spell with an aleph at the end, or a hey?
I think it's
Probably a hey. You can easily skip this. It won't affect the rest of the discussion here. But these are 4 different numerical gematrias, all based on the Yud Kei Vav Kei. And I'll explain that in a moment, because 26 is the basic number of the 4 letters. But what happens when you write out the 4 letters? A Yud, when you write it out, it itself is made up of 3 letters. Yud, Vav, Dalet. So suddenly the Yud becomes 20. Because the Yud is 10, the Vav is 6, and then 4, so 10 and 10, 20. Now the question is, how do you write Hey? That's why I asked you the question. You could write Hey Aleph, you could write Hey Hey, you could write Hey Yud. So all these show different permutation of these letters, and they add up respectively to 4 different ways of combining them. One adds up to 45, one adds up to 52, one adds up to 63, and one adds up to 72. So you'll find sometimes in Kabbalistic and Hasidic writings these names. As I said, this is more of a footnote. I just wanted to point out how this affects literally all discussions about words and names and numbers and so on. And they're all the different types of gematrias. But let's get back to the basic. Because if you master the basic gematria, it's much easier, obviously, to climb to stage 2 and figure out other forms of numerical configurations. Another introduction I want to make before I continue is that a gematria also helps people understand the connections between different things. Let's say your name Adina adds up to number 70. There are other words in Hebrew that add up to number 70. And they have a relationship because they have the same gematria. But the qualification I want to make here is that a lot of people who are probably more novices and don't know the entire science and art of it, just go ahead and start comparing different things that are number 70 and say, okay, this is number 70, this is number 70, and therefore we can just make a correlation. It's not the case. It goes the other way around. Because 2 things are connected, that's why their numbers are going to be connected. Not that you find 2 things of the same number, you can just stick one wall to the next, as they say. We can't just stick walls together. You have to understand firstly the significance of a name or the meaning of the word. Then you could say that relates to another word, because they have, the classic example would be the number another 70, happens to be 70, is this expression nichnas yayin yotza soid. Okay? It says when wine enters, the secrets come out. As we see, someone drinks wine, they start, they like to say, a drunk, what's on their lung is on their tongue. In Yiddish there's an expression, was auf dem Lung is auf dem Zung. But it also has a positive meaning, that when you drink wine, your inner dimension is revealed. Just like the grape has concealed within it wine, so too, and when you squeeze the grape, that wine is produced. So too, we all have inner secrets, more deeper things, and when you drink wine, it brings the secret out. So the interesting thing is the gematria of yayin, which is wine, is what? Is 70. The gematria of soid, secret, is also 70. Because yayin is yud, yud, nun. Yud is 10, another 10 is yud, nun is 50, that's 70. Sod is samach is 60, vav is 6, and dalet is 4, 70. It's different kind of different words. So the words themselves, if you saw yayin here, wine, secret here, you wouldn't necessarily connect them. But based on this Talmudic statement, you realize they both carry the power of a secret. And therefore, they have the same number. So it didn't begin because they both have the same number, it was because they had a relationship. Therefore, it's the way the cosmic energies work, that's why they have the same number. So it's important to realize it's not the number that makes the connection, it's the connection that makes the number. That's a critical piece in understanding what gematrias are. And avoids a lot of mistakes that people make. They start looking around, okay, what else is number 70? And okay, I must have a connection to that. You see, if let's say 75th Avenue, that's the place I have to go shopping. Not necessarily. That's a little going overboard. Because first you need a connection, then you need the numerical equivalent of it. Okay. So with that said, you suddenly see a new horizons and completely new vistas, and horizons open up when you start looking at the number of words. Here, right here. Yayin means wine. Sod means secret. But when you look at the gematria, you suddenly realize that you can learn deep things about wine and about secrets by looking at the number. And the same is true across the board with every name, of either a person or of an object or of anything in existence. The name carries the energy, as I described in the introduction, and that energy, part of that energy, is also the numerical, the equivalent, the numerology of that word or name. Now, one has to be careful because not everyone's a master of this, but there are those, there were Kabbalists and mystics, who were able to look at someone's name and able to somewhat recognize certain patterns and personality that that person has. And we're not talking here any prophecy or miracles. It's simply because the name carries energy. And the name carries energy, means it's your energy. It's the name that you were given, which we told the Arizal. The writings of the Arizal was a great mystic who says that when parents give a name to children, it's like a mini prophecy. They may not know it, but God puts the right name in their mouths, which is why one of the only areas where you don't have rabbis and leaders will advise on a name, you'll never find advice in a name. You'll see the names in the Bible, for example. Leah gave the names. The parents give the names. Even though you can go, let's say, to a sage and say, what name do you think? The sage will always say, you, as parents, have the prophecy, the mini prophecy. God will give you the right name to put into the right name that this child needs to have. Now, sometimes it's a name after a grandparent, after a loved one, after someone that you want to remember and memorialize. That's part of it. But a name is a very powerful force. And we see, even though on one hand, a name you can say is only a handle. You can exist without a name. If you lived alone on this earth, you wouldn't need a name. You don't need a name to call yourself, even though I know some people do speak to themselves. And they say, what's the matter with you, Adina, right? You know what, or what's the matter with you, whoever it may be. But in essence, we don't really need a name. On the other hand, a name is critical for us to be able to communicate to each other, and we know that a name also touches the core. A person could be asleep. A person could even be in a faint state, in a comatose state, and you call their name, there's something that touches them very deeply. Because the name does associate to the way, as I said before, how the soul channels inside of you. So therefore, the gematria, the number that associates with your name, is therefore also very significant. And Tanya, in Shar Yechid V'Amuna, in the second section of Tanya, chapter 1, the Baal Tad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi says that the number, the letters, the number of the numerology of a particular word gives you the number of energies that that word contains. So in a sense, when you say the word Yain 70, 70, it's like 70 energies. And what's 70? So you can study, and those that are familiar with the number 70 know it has certain power. 70 is 10 times 7. It's the 7 faculties times 10, meaning their complete cycle. So with the number, you can begin to recognize different elements. For example, there are numbers we're very familiar with. Everyone knows Chai. Chai is one of the most famous ones, right? The Chai. What's Chai? So we all know Chai means life, but it's also number 18, which is many people will give donations in the number 18. 18, 36, 72, 1800. Because we want, with that number, we want to convey and we want to channel into our lives life. Chai for life. So Chai is one, as I said, one of the most famous ones. And there you have both, the number 18. Now, the question is, does number 18 connect to the word life? The answer is yes. When you study, again, Kabbalistic teachings, and again, this is not the place to go into all of this, the word 18, the number 18, adds up to things that give us life. So when you talk about numbers, as I said, the numbers have different words that share the same numerology, but you also have the meaning behind a number. Now, of course, the classic numbers that we know most of, especially when you talk about Judaism, are the number, like the number 1. So number 1 is the unity of God. Wherever you see an aleph, letter 1 or the number 1, you know that you're connecting to something that's unified. Whenever you see the number 2, you can rest assured you're identifying with diversity, because 2 immediately means there are 2 forces. And interesting, number 3, it always identifies with the concept of harmony, because 3 is the harmonizer. It takes energy 1, energy 2, which may conflict, and it reconciles between them. Kasav Ashlishi, the third verse, the third dimension, like a mediator or a translator. You have Hebrew, English, and you have a translator, number 3, that connects the two, like a bridge. So when you think of these numbers are easy to relate to, easy to explain, It obviously gets more complicated when you get to larger numbers. So you see how the numbers all come into play again and again. There's nowhere where the numerology and the gematrias don't have a role in understanding the deeper meaning behind words and behind experiences. And the same thing, artists do the same thing with art. You can say gematria is a certain place where science meets art because there's a certain elegance to it that's very artistic in its eloquence and poetry. The poetry of numbers, as we know, mathematics is considered the purest science. People call the poetry of numbers, the poetic numbers. And so therefore the numbers really play a role, and especially when you're familiar with music. And music is about numbers, and music is about a tempo and a certain pace, a certain what's the word I'm looking for? Not beat, a certain scale, rhythm. But there's another word, the pace, as there's the spaces between
cadence
notes. There's a word for it. It'll come to me. Gate, maybe not gate.
Cadence.
Anybody play piano here? So there's another word. Well, one of those words. Anyway, the point is, rhythm is definitely
what
a good word.
What is cadence?
There's another.
It's like Jeopardy.
There's a word for the timing between.
I like this guy.
What is that called?
He's great. Things skip my mind all the time, most of the time.
The point is that all this comes down to a music and an art, and it's all about a certain type of rhythm and structure. And on the other side, there's also science to it. The science of understanding the dynamics. You know, mathematics, some people call a science, some people call poetry. Depends which side you look at it. I mean, it really has both elements to it. The eloquence is definitely very poetic. But the same thing, it really goes back to the numbers behind the words that we use and the names that we have and the things, what we call by name, which of course also begs, in a sense, like almost behooves us to want to know Hebrew better, because the better you know Hebrew, the better you really can use the gematrias. In English, you don't quite have the ability to do so because words, as I just mentioned earlier, the Hebrew language is a metaphorical language. Every word is rich with meaning. In English, when you say the word table, table has a Latin root, but that's it. It's not multi-use. You can't use table in many different ways. And there's no number behind the word table, like what's the equivalent of the letter T? A, B, L, E. I mean, you can create a numerology, but there's nothing going on there. Because these are descriptive languages. All Latin languages are descriptive. Hebrew is a metaphorical language. It's actually a language of the soul. We mentioned rhythm already. Yeah, it's one of those words. We got the idea. And Hebrew, on the other hand, is a metaphorical language, a language of feelings. I just read somewhere that how many letters are there in the English language that are conventionally used? You'd never believe the number. 250,000. I thought there'd be millions. How many letters, how many words in the English language? Usable words, not words that aren't used anymore. Around 250,000. Yeah. And Hebrew, 75,000. Which tells you that the Hebrew language is metaphorical, because one word in Hebrew requires a sentence in English and requires a paragraph in French, just for the record. I'm almost sure that's the number. I looked it up. You could look it up. Look up how many letters are in the English, not letters, words in the English language. Again, usable word. Not we're talking about. There's of course obscure words that no one ever uses anymore. You'd think there's a lot more, but that's what it is. Something of that nature. You can check it out. I see she's googling it there. Let's see.
And thank you, Rabbi Jacobson, for your great output in this meaningful life. And in closing, I would like to mention that I have just opened a Haphazard Universe Facebook page. Learn more about results. I just opened this up last night and posted my last video to start it out. And so comment, like, and subscribe. Don't forget to share. Join the Haphazard Universe Facebook page, and I will be getting some equipment, some cameras, and well, at least one good camera, and a better microphone and putting some time in with your subscriptions. So if you think any of this was educational and informative and humorous, please share so that I can get a few more subscribers and a little more inspiration to continue forth. So thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.